There's a particular shade of blue that fills the sky just after the sun has set, but before darkness fully claims the night. That in-between time when the world feels suspended, quieter, more honest. That exact blue filled the windows of the 37th floor as I sat at my desk, watching Marcus Reed sign document after document, his fountain pen scratching across paper in perfect controlled strokes. I'd been his personal assistant for exactly 11 months and 4 days. Not that I was counting. Evans, did you send the projection reports to Lawson and Burke? His voice was low, almost gravelly from the 14-hour workday. He never called me Daniel, always Evans. Yes, sir. Sent at 6:42 p.m. with your annotations. He nodded without looking up, but the corner of his mouth twitched ever so slightly. I'd come to recognize that as his version of approval. Marcus Reed, at 34, was already legendary in financial consulting circles. Brilliant, ruthlessly efficient, and frustratingly impossible to read. Except, somehow, I'd learned to read him anyway. The office was empty except for us. Everyone else had filtered out hours ago, junior analysts rushing to happy hours, senior partners heading home to families. The cleaning staff had already come and gone, nodding politely at us as they worked around our late-night session. It was just Marcus and me now, surrounded by the blue half-light seeping through floor-to-ceiling windows and the warm yellow glow of his desk lamp. I checked my watch, 9:37 p.m. You should go home, he said suddenly, still not looking up. It's late. I can stay until you're finished, I replied automatically, the same exchange we'd had dozens of times. This time he did look up, his dark eyes finding mine across the desk. You don't have to. I know. Something passed between us in that moment, something unspoken that made the air feel suddenly dense. He held my gaze a beat too long before looking down again. I was 23, fresh out of college with a business degree and mountains of student debt when I landed this job. Personal assistant to Marcus Reed, the youngest partner at Blackridge Consulting. The pay was excellent, the benefits better, and the prestige would open doors I couldn't even imagine. That's what I told myself when I took the job. I didn't account for him. The first time I noticed something was different between us was 3 months in. I'd brought him coffee, black, no sugar, and our fingers brushed as I handed him the cup. A completely ordinary occurrence, except it wasn't. His hand froze for the briefest moment, his eyes darting to mine with an intensity that made my stomach drop. Then it was gone, replaced by his usual mask of professional detachment. Thank you, Evans, he'd said it, voice perfectly neutral. I'd mumbled something and retreated to my desk, my fingertips tingling where they'd touched his. That night, I caught myself replaying the moment as I tried to fall asleep, analyzing it from every angle. Was I imagining things? Probably. Marcus Reed was not only my boss, but the embodiment of untouchable professionalism. He wore tailored Tom Ford suits like armor and kept everyone, even the other partners, at a careful distance. Yet somehow, I seemed to exist in his orbit more closely than anyone else. Evans, Marcus called from his office, pulling me from my memories. Can you come in here? I straightened my tie, a habit I'd picked up from watching him, and walked into his private office. The wall behind his desk was glass, offering a panoramic view of the city lights now twinkling in the deepening darkness. Sir? Sit. He gestured to the chair across from him. I need your perspective on something. I sat, notebook ready. This was part of our routine, too. Late at night, when everyone else was gone, Marcus sometimes sought my input on projects. At first, I thought he was testing me, but gradually I realized he actually valued my opinion. It was disorienting, being valued by someone who seemed to value almost nothing. He pushed a portfolio across the desk. The Hansen acquisition. Something doesn't add up in their financial history. I opened the folder and scanned the documents inside while he watched me. I could feel his eyes on my face as I read, but I'd gotten used to the weight of his attention. Or at least, I pretended I had. The profit margins in their Asian markets seem inconsistent with their reported expansion, I said finally, looking up to find him still studying me. Almost like they're hiding losses. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Exactly what I thought. Pride bloomed in my chest at his approval, warm and dangerous. I knew better than to crave it so much. It's nearly 10, he said, glancing at the ridiculously expensive watch on his wrist. Let me drive you home. This was new. In 11 months, he'd never offered me a ride. Oh, I can just take the subway. It's late, Daniel. My first name in his mouth sounded fusion, almost intimate. I tried not to visibly react. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Thank you. His car was exactly what you'd expect. A black Audi, immaculate inside and out. I sat stiffly in the passenger seat, suddenly hyper-aware of how close we were outside the professional container of the office. The car smelled like expensive leather and his subtle cologne, sandalwood with something deeper I couldn't name. Where am I going? He asked, hands resting lightly on the steering wheel. I gave him my address in Brooklyn, embarrassed by the distance and the neighborhood. Not terrible, but definitely not where someone like Marcus Reed would live. He navigated through late-night Manhattan traffic with the same confident precision he applied to everything. For several blocks, we rode in silence, not uncomfortable exactly, but charged, like the air before a storm. How's your mother? He asked suddenly. I glanced over, surprised. I'd mentioned her illness only once, months ago, when I'd needed to leave early for her doctor's appointment. She's better. The new medication is helping. He nodded. Good, that's good. Another silence fell. You never talk about your family, I said, before I could stop myself. His hands tightened almost imperceptibly on the wheel. No, I don't. I should have let it drop. That's what anyone else would have done, but something about the darkness of the car and the city lights sliding over his profile made me braver. Why not? He stopped at a red light and turned to look at me. In the dim glow of the dashboard, his expression was softer than I'd ever seen it. Not much to tell, he said finally. Father was a surgeon, mother was a lawyer, both brilliant, both absent. They died in a car accident when I was at Princeton. I'm sorry, I said quietly. It was a long time ago. The light turned green, and he returned his attention to the road. But something had shifted in the car. A door had been cracked open. No siblings? I ventured. No, just me. He paused. You have a sister, right? Lauren. The fact that he remembered her name from some casual mention months ago did something strange to my chest. Yeah, she's in grad school in Chicago. He nodded, as if filing this information away. You're close? Very. We basically raised each other after Dad left. I hadn't meant to share that much. I never talked about my father. Marcus didn't pry further, and I was grateful. Instead, he asked about my neighborhood as we crossed the bridge into Brooklyn, letting me fill the car with safer words about favorite coffee shops and the elderly Polish couple who owned the laundromat on my corner. By the time he pulled up in front of my building, a pre-war walk-up that had seen better days, something had changed between us. I couldn't name it, but I could feel it. Thank you for the ride, I said, hand on the door handle. Daniel, he said, my name still strange and new in his voice. You're doing excellent work. In anyone else's mouth, it would have been a simple compliment. From Marcus Reed, it felt monumental. Thank you, sir. Marcus, he corrected quietly, when we're not in the office. I swallowed hard. Thank you, Marcus. He nodded once, eyes holding mine for a long moment, before I finally broke away and stepped out of the car. I watched him drive away, standing on the sidewalk long after his taillights had disappeared. That night, I barely slept. Things were different after that night. Nothing you could point to directly. He was still demanding, still exacting in his standards. But the atmosphere between us had changed. He called me Daniel when we were alone. Sometimes I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. Once, when I brought him lunch during a particularly grueling strategy session, his fingers deliberately brushed against mine as he took the bag. I told myself I was imagining it all. Then came the Tokyo account. I need you to come with me to Japan, he said one afternoon, casual as commenting on the weather. 2 weeks, The Nakamura merger requires personal attention. I stared at him. In 11 months, I'd never accompanied him on an international trip. Sir? I stammered. Don't you usually take Jeffries for international deals? Jeffries was one of the senior analysts, experienced and polished. I need someone who notices the things others miss. His eyes met mine. You notice things, Daniel. The way he said it made heat crawl up my neck. I'll need to make arrangements for my mother's care, I said, mind racing, already taken care of. I've arranged for a home health aide to check in daily. Premium service. He handed me a folder. Your flight details, hotel information, and an advance for expenses. We leave Saturday. I took the folder numbly. Thank you. He nodded and returned to his computer, dismissing me without words. But as I turned to leave, he spoke again. Pack something nice for evenings. The Japanese appreciate proper attire. I looked down at my off-the-rack suit, suddenly self-conscious. I don't really have... Second folder, he interrupted, not looking up. There's a card for Barney's. Get what you need. My face burned. I can't accept. It's a business expense, Evans. His tone was final. You're representing Blackridge. I murmured thanks and retreated to my desk, heart hammering. Inside the second folder was a corporate card with my name on it and a note with a spending limit that made my eyes widen. I told myself this was normal, that this wasn't personal, that the flutter in my stomach was just anxiety about my first international business trip. I almost believed it. Tokyo was a revelation, a neon dreamscape of efficiency and contradiction, but I hardly saw the city. Most of our time was spent in conference rooms and private dining rooms, negotiating terms of the merger with Nakamura's team. I watched Marcus in his element, speaking fluent Japanese, commanding the room with subtle authority. I took notes, provided data when asked, and tried not to stare at how the tailored lines of his suit accentuated his shoulders as he leaned over the spreadsheets. Our hotel was luxurious in that understated Japanese way, minimalist perfection with prices that would make most people faint. My room was across the hall from his, a fact that shouldn't have mattered but somehow did. On our fifth night, after a particularly successful negotiation session, Marcus knocked on my door. Come down for a drink, he said when I opened it. He'd removed his tie, unbuttoned his collar. It was the most undone I'd ever seen him. I hesitated only briefly before grabbing my keycard. The hotel bar was on the 40th floor, offering panoramic views of the glittering Tokyo skyline. We sat in a corner booth, the low lighting casting shadows across his features. He ordered whiskey for both of us, something rare and expensive that burned sweetly going down. You did well today, he said, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. That observation about their logistics inefficiency opened the door to the warehouse consolidation proposal. Just doing my job, I replied, though the praise made me warm in a way that had nothing to do with the whiskey. No, he said, looking directly at me. You're doing far more than your job description. I didn't know how to respond to that, so I took another sip instead. Why Blackridge? He asked suddenly. With your qualifications, you could have gone anywhere. I considered giving him the interview answer, something about growth opportunities and corporate culture. Instead, I found myself telling the truth. My dad left when I was 12. No warning, no goodbyes, just gone. I looked down at my drink. He was an investment banker who decided his family wasn't worth the investment. The irony wasn't lost on me. Marcus was quiet, watching me with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable, but somehow didn't. I guess I wanted to understand that world, I continued. The world that was more important to him than we were. And, have you found your answer? I looked up, meeting his eyes. I found that the world he chose isn't inherently cold. It's the people who make it that way. Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or recognition. And what about you, Daniel? Are you becoming cold? The question caught me off guard. No one had ever asked me that before. I hope not, I said honestly. I don't want to lose the parts of myself that can still feel things. His eyes never left mine. That's a dangerous position in this industry. Is it? To feel things? Yes. The word was almost a whisper. Is that why you don't? Feel things? The whiskey had made me bold. For a long moment, I thought I'd crossed a line. His expression remained carefully neutral, but something intense brewed behind his eyes. Then he leaned forward slightly, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixing with the whiskey on his breath. What makes you think I don't feel things, Daniel? My heart stuttered in my chest. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He checked it, his professional mask sliding back into place. Nakamura needs to speak with me, he said, standing. Don't wait up. Tomorrow's negotiations start early. And then he was gone, leaving me alone with a half-empty whiskey and a head full of questions. The rest of the Tokyo trip passed in a blur of meetings, contracts, and careful distance. Whatever door had cracked open that night in the bar seemed firmly closed again. Marcus was polite but professional, keeping our interactions strictly business. I told myself it was better this way. Safer. By the time we returned to New York, I'd almost convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. The lingering looks, the deliberate touches, the loaded conversation in the bar. Almost. Work resumed its familiar rhythm, but with subtle differences. Marcus began including me in partner meetings, valuing my input in ways that raised eyebrows among the senior staff. He sent me articles he thought would interest me. Not work-related, but pieces on architecture, my minor in college, or classical music, a passion I'd mentioned once in passing. One rainy Tuesday, he appeared at my desk with coffee. Black, no sugar, exactly how I took it. I was getting one anyway, he said by way of explanation, though the coffee shop was 3 blocks away, and I knew for a fact he hadn't left the office. Thank you, I said, taking the cup carefully to avoid touching his fingers. He lingered at my desk a moment too long before nodding and walking away. These small moments accumulated like snowflakes, individually insignificant, collectively undeniable. Something was happening between us, something neither of us acknowledged. You look tired, Marcus said one night as we worked late, reviewing contracts for a new client. I rubbed my eyes. I'm fine. Daniel. Just my name, but waited with concern. I sighed. Mom had a rough weekend. I spent most of it at the hospital. His brow furrowed. You should have called me. Why? The question came out more challenging than I intended. He looked momentarily taken aback. I could have helped. It's not your problem, I said, suddenly angry, though I couldn't explain why. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe it was the months of this undefined thing between us, wearing me down. I didn't say it was my problem, he replied, his voice carefully controlled. Then what am I to you, Marcus? The words escaped before I could stop them. Because sometimes I think, and then you? I trailed off, mortified. He stood completely still, his expression unreadable. For a horrible moment, I thought I'd just destroyed my career and whatever else existed between us. Then he walked to his office door and closed it, plunging us into a privacy that felt dangerous. What do you think you are to me? He asked quietly, turning back to face me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I don't know. Yes, you do. He took a step closer. You notice things, remember? My heart pounded against my ribs. I notice everything about you, I admitted, the words barely audible. He exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath. And what do you see? Someone who keeps everyone at a distance. Except sometimes. Not me, and I don't understand why. Another step closer. Don't you? The tension between us was unbearable now. A living thing filling the space of his darkened office. Outside the windows, rain began to fall, pattering against the glass. This is a bad idea, I whispered, though I wasn't sure what this even was. Yes, he agreed, now close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. It is. We stood there, suspended in that moment of terrible possibility. His eyes dropped to my mouth, just for a second, but long enough to make my lips tingle in anticipation. Then his office phone rang, shattering the silence. We both flinched. Marcus stepped back, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, a rare gesture of frustration I had only seen once or twice before. He moved to his desk and picked up the phone. "Read," he answered, his voice impressively steady. I stood frozen, unsure whether to leave or stay. He gestured for me to sit, so I did, my legs suddenly weak. The call was brief, something about the Hansen acquisition. When he hung up, the charged atmosphere had dissipated somewhat, replaced by a strange awkwardness. "I should go," I said, standing. "Daniel," he said my name like it pained him. It's fine," I interrupted. "It's late. We're both tired. Let's just forget it." He looked at me for a long moment, something like regret flickering in his eyes. "Is that what you want? To forget it?" I swallowed hard. "No," I admitted, "but it's what we should do." Another long silence stretched between us. Finally, he nodded once. "Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow." I gathered my things and walked to the door, feeling his eyes on me the entire way. At the threshold, I paused, hand on the doorknob. "Good night, Marcus," I said without turning around. "Good night, Daniel." I walked out, closing the door behind me, my whole body humming with unresolved tension. The next few days were an exercise in carefully maintained professionalism. We spoke only of work, kept a respectable distance, avoided being alone together. The other staff noticed nothing amiss. This was, after all, how Marcus Reed typically behaved with everyone. But I felt the difference in every interaction, in the deliberate way he avoided my eyes, in how he sent emails instead of calling me into his office. It was like a physical ache, this new distance between us. By Friday, I was a mess of confusion and unacknowledged desire. I stayed late, as usual, but Marcus had left early for a client dinner. The office was quiet as I finished up some expense reports, trying not to think about how empty the space felt without him. I was just shutting down my computer when my phone buzzed with a text. "Are you still at the office?" "Marcus." My heart jumped. "Yes," I replied. "Just finishing up." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. "Stay. I'm coming back. Need to talk to you." I stared at the message, equal parts hope and dread churning in my stomach. "Okay," I texted back, the simplest word carrying the weight of everything unsaid between us. I waited, pacing the empty office, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. 20 minutes later, the elevator dinged, and Marcus stepped out, looking slightly disheveled, his tie loosened, hair ruffled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He stopped when he saw me, standing in the middle of the darkened office, illuminated only by the desk lamp and the city lights streaming through the windows. "You stayed?" he said, sounding almost surprised, despite having asked me to. "You asked me to," I replied simply. He nodded, approaching slowly until we stood just a few feet apart. "Daniel, he began, then stopped, seemingly struggling for words. Marcus Reed, always articulate, suddenly at a loss. "It's okay," I said, though I wasn't sure what I was reassuring him about. "No, it's not." He took a deep breath. "I'm your boss. I know. There are rules, ethics, power dynamics. I know that too." He ran a hand through his hair again. This isn't..." He exhaled sharply. "I don't know how to do this." My heart was hammering so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "Do what, exactly?" His eyes met mine, dark and vulnerable, in a way I'd never seen before. "Care about someone. Like this." The words hung in the air between us, impossible to take back. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at him as the implications washed over me. "Say something," he whispered, a note of uncertainty in his voice that I'd never heard before. I opened my mouth, closed it again. What could I possibly say that wouldn't change everything, that wouldn't risk everything? "I've tried to keep my distance," he continued when I remained silent. "It would be better for both of us if I could. But I find myself drawn to you in ways I can't explain. Don't want to explain." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell the faint trace of whiskey on his breath from his dinner. "Tell me to stop," he said softly. "Tell me I'm wrong about what's happening here, and we'll never speak of this again." The moment stretched between us, pregnant with possibility and danger. Everything, my job, my future, my heart, balanced on the knife's edge of this decision. "I can't tell you that," I finally whispered back. His expression shifted, relief and fear, and something else mixing in his eyes. He raised his hand slowly, hesitantly, until his fingers hovered just above my cheek, not quite touching. "Daniel," he said, my name a question and an answer all at once. "What are we doing?" I didn't know how to respond, frozen in the impossible space between what I wanted and what I feared. His hand trembled slightly, still not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat of his skin. Outside, the city hummed with distant life. Inside, there was only us and this moment suspended in time. "I've never felt this way about anyone," he said so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Man or woman. Never wanted someone to see me until you." The confession hung in the air, raw and honest in a way that stripped away all pretense. No longer boss and assistant, no longer separated by position or power. Just two people standing on the edge of something both terrifying and exhilarating. I closed my eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of his words, by the implications of what might happen next. When I opened them again, his face was closer, his eyes searching mine for permission, for reciprocation, for any sign that I felt even a fraction of what he was admitting to feeling. "Say something," he whispered again, his voice breaking slightly. "Please." "I don't know what to say," I finally whispered, my voice barely audible even in the silence of the empty office. Marcus's hand finally made contact with my cheek, his touch so light it felt like a question. His palm was warm against my skin, slightly calloused in a way I hadn't expected. My eyes fluttered closed for just a moment. "We should stop," he said, even as his thumb grazed my cheekbone. "This can't happen." "I know." But I made no move to pull away. The air between us felt electric, charged with all the things we'd left unsaid for months. His eyes searched mine, looking for answers to questions neither of us had dared to ask aloud. "I should go," I said finally, breaking the spell. I stepped back, his hand falling away from my face. The loss of contact felt physical, like stepping from warmth into cold. Marcus nodded, composing himself with visible effort. "Yes, it's late." "Good night, then," I said, gathering my things with trembling hands. "Daniel," he called softly as I reached the elevator. When I turned, he was still standing where I had left him, silhouetted against the city lights. "This conversation isn't over." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "I know." The elevator doors closed between us, and I leaned back against the cool metal wall, heart hammering. Whatever was happening between us, we'd crossed a line tonight, one we couldn't uncross. I barely slept that night, replaying his words over and over. I've never felt this way about anyone, man or woman. Never wanted someone to see me until you. By morning, I'd convinced myself that I'd misunderstood, that the whole interaction had been colored by exhaustion and my own inappropriate feelings. Marcus Reed wasn't interested in me. He couldn't be. The power imbalance alone was enough reason for him to keep his distance, not to mention the professional complications. And yet, the memory of his hand on my face felt burned into my skin. When I arrived at the office the next morning, earlier than usual, I half expected some sort of awkwardness. Instead, I found a note on my desk in Marcus's precise handwriting. "Chicago client meeting. Back Thursday. Expense reports need approval by EOD. He'd left town." Relief and disappointment warred in my chest as I settled in for 3 days without him. Those 3 days stretched endlessly. I kept myself busy with work, stayed late each night, as if he might materialize in his office if I waited long enough. I checked my phone constantly for texts that never came. By Thursday morning, I was a mess of anxiety and anticipation. When the elevator doors opened at 9:17 a.m. and Marcus stepped out, I pretended to be absorbed in something on my computer screen. From the corner of my eye, I I saw him pause at the sight of me, then continue to his office. "Evans!" he called a moment later, his voice perfectly professional. "Can I see you?" The use of my last name felt like a splash of cold water. So that's how it was going to be. Back to normal, as if nothing had happened. I grabbed my tablet and walked into his office, face carefully neutral. "Good morning, sir," I said, shutting the door behind me. "How was Chicago?" "Productive." He looked tired, shadows under his eyes, suggesting he'd slept as poorly as I had. "Did you complete the expense approvals?" "Yes, sir. All processed." He nodded, then gestured for me to sit. I perched on the edge of the chair across from his desk, spine straight, the perfect professional assistant. "Daniel," he said softly, dropping the formality once I was seated. "About the other night." "We don't have to talk about it," I interrupted. "It's fine." His jaw tightened. "It's not fine." "Then what is it?" The question came out more challenging than I intended. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Complicated." "That's not an answer?" "No," he agreed. "It's not." We sat in tense silence for a moment, neither willing to be the first to address what had passed between us. "I left town to clear my head," he admitted finally. "It didn't work." Something warm unfurled in my chest. "What does that mean?" "It means I still don't know what to do about this." He gestured between us. "But ignoring it clearly isn't working." "So what now?" I asked, scarcely daring to breathe. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "Board meeting in 5 minutes. We'll have to continue this later." I nodded and stood, professional mask back in place. "I'll have the quarterly reports ready when you return." His eyes held mine for a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you, Daniel." I returned to my desk, simultaneously disappointed and relieved at the reprieve. Whatever was brewing between us, I wasn't sure I was ready to face it head-on. Later turned out to be much later. Marcus was swept into back-to-back meetings that kept him occupied until well past 7. I stayed, of course, working through dinner and waiting for him to emerge. When he finally did, looking exhausted, he paused at my desk. "You didn't have to stay." "I know," I replied, the same response I always gave. He studied me for a moment. "Have you eaten?" I gestured to the empty sandwich wrapper on my desk. "Hours ago." "Come have a drink with me," he said suddenly. "I think we both need one." My heart stuttered. "Where?" "Here." He produced a bottle of Macallan from his briefcase. "Less complicated than a bar." Less public, he meant. Less chance of being seen together in a context that might raise questions. I followed him into his office, watching as he closed the blinds and pulled 2 crystal tumblers from a cabinet behind his desk. He poured 2 fingers of amber liquid into each and handed one to me. Our fingers brushed during the exchange, a brief contact that sent electricity racing up my arm. His eyes darted to mine, confirming he'd felt it too. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the small seating area in the corner of his office, a leather sofa and 2 matching armchairs arranged around a low table. I chose one of the armchairs and he took the other, leaving the sofa empty between us. A deliberate choice, I thought. "To complicated situations," he said, raising his glass slightly. I mirrored the gesture. "And unclear solutions." The whiskey burned pleasantly going down, warming me from the inside. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. "I went to Chicago to convince myself that this is inappropriate," Marcus said finally, staring into his glass. "That I'm misreading signals, projecting my own feelings." The hesitation before feelings made my breath catch. "And did you," I asked, "convince yourself?" He looked up, meeting my eyes. "No." One simple word, but it changed everything. I took another sip of whiskey, trying to calm my racing heart. "I've never been attracted to a man before," he continued, his voice low. "Not that I was aware of, anyway. It's disorienting." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "And you?" he asked, a note of vulnerability in his voice that I'd never heard before. Is this familiar territory? Yes, I admitted, though not with someone I work for. That's the other complication, he sighed. I'm your boss, Daniel. There's an inherent power imbalance that makes this, whatever this is, ethically questionable at best. I know. Do you? He leaned forward slightly. Because I need you to understand that I would never want you to feel pressured or obligated in any way. I don't, I assured him. Trust me, if I didn't want... I trailed off, unsure how to complete that sentence without revealing too much. Want what? He pressed. I took another sip of whiskey for courage. This, whatever's happening between us. His expression softened. And what do you think is happening between us? I don't know, I answered honestly. But it feels important. Significant. He nodded slowly, as if carefully weighing his next words. It does. We fell silent again, the confession hanging in the air between us. Outside, the city continued its nightly rhythm, oblivious to the seismic shift occurring in this quiet office. I should probably go, I said eventually, though it was the last thing I wanted. Probably, he agreed, but made no move to stand. Instead, he topped off both our glasses, his movements deliberate and controlled. As he handed me my refilled glass, his fingers lingered against mine a second too long, no longer accidental, but intentional. When did you first notice? He asked suddenly. Notice what? This tension between us. I considered lying, downplaying it. Instead, I told the truth. The second week I worked for you. You were reviewing a presentation I'd prepared, and you smiled, really smiled, not that professional half smile you usually wear. I'd made a joke in the footnotes that no one was supposed to see. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. That long ago? I nodded. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was just impressed by you and confusing admiration with something else. And when did you realize you weren't imagining it? In Tokyo, I said softly. In the bar, when you asked me if I was becoming cold. The way you looked at me. He exhaled slowly. Tokyo changed things. Yes? I almost didn't invite you on that trip, he confessed. I knew it would be dangerous to spend that much time together outside the office. Dangerous. Harder to maintain boundaries. I took another sip of whiskey, feeling the alcohol loosening my inhibitions just enough to ask, and is that what you want? To maintain boundaries? His eyes darkened. What I want and what's right aren't necessarily the same thing. That's not an answer? No, he agreed. It's not. The tension between us was palpable now, thick enough to touch. I watched as he set his glass down and stood, moving to look out the window at the city below. His back was to me, shoulders tense beneath his perfectly tailored suit. I'm 34 years old, he said quietly. I've spent my entire adult life building this career, becoming the kind of man people respect. Fear, sometimes. I remained silent, sensing he needed to work through his thoughts. I don't let people get close, he continued. It's easier that way. Safer, until you. What's different about me? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He turned then, his expression more open, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. Everything. The single word hung between us, weighted with meaning. I stood slowly, drawn to him like a magnet, unable to resist the pull any longer. His eyes tracked my movement as I crossed the room to stand beside him at the window. Marcus, I said softly, testing the sound of his name in this new context. He reached out then, his hand coming to rest on my shoulder. The weight of it was warm, solid, grounding. His thumb brushed against my collarbone, the touch whisper-light through my shirt. Neither of us spoke, both afraid to break whatever spell had fallen over the darkened office. I don't know how to do this, he said finally, his voice rough. I don't either, I admitted. His hand moved from my shoulder to the side of my neck, fingers curling slightly into my hair. My pulse jumped under his touch, and I knew he could feel it. We should stop, he whispered, even as his eyes dropped to my lips. Probably, I agreed, but made no move to pull away. Instead, I placed my hand hesitantly on his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the steady beat of his heart beneath my palm. He inhaled sharply at the contact. Daniel, he murmured, my name a question and a plea wrapped into one. And then, before I could respond, his lips were on mine. The kiss was tentative at first, a gentle pressure of his mouth against mine, giving me every opportunity to pull away. But pulling away was the last thing on my mind. I responded instantly, leaning into him, my free hand coming up to grip his arm for support as my knees threatened to give way. He made a small sound in the back of his throat, surprise or pleasure I couldn't tell. And then the kiss deepened. His lips parted mine, the taste of whiskey on his tongue as it slid against my own. His hand tightened in my hair, angling my head to deepen the kiss further. My fingers curled into the fabric of his shirt, holding on like he might disappear if I let go. The kiss was everything I'd imagined and nothing like I'd expected, both gentle and demanding, controlled and desperate. I felt surrounded by him, consumed by the taste and smell and feel of him. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed as if gathering himself. That was... he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. Yeah, I agreed, equally speechless. It was. He pulled back slightly to look at me, his eyes searching mine for any sign of regret or uncertainty. Finding none, he brushed his thumb across my lower lip, still wet from his kiss. I've been wanting to do that for months, he confessed quietly. The admission sent a thrill through me. Why didn't you? You know why. His expression grew more serious. This complicates everything. Reality began to seep back in around the edges of this perfect moment. He was right, of course. This changed everything. Our working relationship, the power dynamics, our professional futures. What happens now? I asked, not releasing my grip on his shirt. He sighed, his hand moving to cup my cheek. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. That's not like you, I said with a small smile. You always have a plan. Not for this, he admitted. This wasn't supposed to happen. Do you regret it? I couldn't help asking, suddenly insecure. No, he answered without hesitation. I probably should, but I don't. Relief flooded through me. Me neither. He kissed me again, briefly this time, but no less intense. When he pulled away, he looked almost surprised at himself, as if he couldn't quite believe what was happening. We should talk about this, he said, reluctantly dropping his hand from my face. Really talk about it. All the implications, the complications. I know. I finally released my grip on his shirt, smoothing the wrinkled fabric with my palm. But not tonight. He nodded in agreement. Not tonight. We stood there for another moment, neither wanting to be the first to step away. Finally, he took a small step back, creating a sliver of space between us. The loss of contact was almost painful. I should go, I said, though it was the last thing I wanted. Yes, he agreed, equally reluctant. It's late. I gathered my things while he poured himself another finger of whiskey, both of us stealing glances at each other across the office. At the door, I paused, hand on the knob. Good night, Marcus, I said softly. He looked up, eyes dark and intense. Good night, Daniel. The weight of everything unspoken hung between us as I closed the door and walked to the elevator, lips still tingling from his kiss. The next day was surreal. I arrived at work, half expecting everything to be different, but the office carried on as usual. Analysts hunched over spreadsheets, the hum of phones and computers, the smell of expensive coffee brewing in the kitchen. Marcus was already in a meeting when I arrived, visible through the glass wall of the conference room. He looked perfectly composed in a charcoal suit, commanding the room with his usual authority. Only I knew the taste of his lips, the surprising gentleness of his hands. An email from him arrived mid-morning. Dinner tonight, my place, 8 p.m. We need to talk. Just that, no greeting or signature. My heart raced as I typed a simple reply, "I'll be there." The day crawled by in a haze of anticipation and anxiety. What would happen tonight? Would he end whatever was starting between us before it really began? The thought made my chest ache. At 6 p.m., he emerged from his office, briefcase in hand. As he passed my desk, he paused briefly. "See you at 8, he said quietly, just for my ears. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He held my gaze for a moment longer than necessary, then continued toward the elevator. I stayed another hour, trying to focus on work but accomplishing little. Finally, I gave up and headed home to shower and change. I stood in front of my closet, agonizing over what to wear. This wasn't work, but it wasn't exactly a date either. Finally, I settled on dark jeans and a simple blue button-down, casual but not too casual. Marcus lived in Tribeca, in one of those converted warehouse buildings with obscenely high ceilings and original brick walls. The doorman nodded when I gave my name, as if he'd been expecting me. "Mr. Reed is on the top floor," he said, directing me to a private elevator that required a key card. "He said to send you right up." The elevator opened directly into Marcus's apartment, a vast, open space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The decor was minimalist, but expensive, all clean lines and muted colors. It looked like something from an architectural magazine, beautiful but impersonal. Except for the bookshelves. One entire wall was filled with books. Not decorative leather-bound collections chosen for appearance, but well-worn paperbacks and hardcovers that had clearly been read many times. It was the first glimpse I'd had of Marcus's inner life, his interests outside work, and I found myself drawn to it immediately. "You can tell a lot about someone from their books." His voice came from behind me. I turned to find him watching me from the kitchen area, where he was opening a bottle of wine. He changed into jeans and a simple black Henley that clung to his shoulders in a way his suits never did. Seeing him like this, in his home, dressed casually, it felt intimate in a way that even our kiss hadn't. "What do these tell you about me?" he asked, nodding toward the bookshelves. I scanned the titles, noting the eclectic mix. "That you're more complicated than you let people see." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Is that a good thing?" "It's an interesting thing," I replied, moving closer to him. He handed me a glass of red wine. Hungry." "Not really," I admitted. "Nervous." His expression softened. "Me too." That simple confession, that Marcus Reed, always in control, was nervous, put me more at ease than anything else could have. "Come sit," he said, leading me to a sleek sectional sofa positioned to take advantage of the city view. We sat near each other but not touching, both cradling our wine glasses like shields. "So," I began, when the silence stretched too long. We're talking," he agreed, taking a sip of his wine. "About last night." "About the kiss," I clarified, not wanting there to be any ambiguity. His eyes met mine. "About the kiss. Do you regret it?" I asked again, needing reassurance. "No," he said firmly, "but I'm concerned about what it means. For you, for us." "Professionally, you mean?" He nodded. "Among other things." "What other things?" He set his wine glass down on the coffee table and turned to face me more fully. "Daniel, I'm your boss. I have power over your career, your livelihood. That creates a dynamic that's problematic." "I know that. Do you?" His voice was gentle but serious. "Because I need to know that whatever happens between us is what you truly want, not what you think you should want to please me or advance your career." "Marcus," I said, setting my own glass down and shifting closer to him. "I kissed you back last night because I wanted to. Because I've wanted to for months. Not because you're my boss." His expression remained troubled. "It's not just that. There's the age difference. 11 years isn't that much," I interrupted. "And the fact that I've never been with a man before," he continued as if I hadn't spoken. "This is all new territory for me." I hesitated, suddenly uncertain. "Is that a problem for you?" "No," he said quickly. "It's just... I don't want to hurt you, Daniel. I'm not good at relationships. I never have been. And this, us, it's complicated in so many ways. Life is complicated, I said. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. Try what, exactly? He asked, a note of vulnerability in his voice. What is it you want from this? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? A fling? A relationship? Both seemed equally impossible, and yet, sitting here in his apartment, looking into his eyes, I couldn't imagine walking away. I want you, I said simply. Whatever that means, however complicated it makes things. I just want you. Something in his expression changed, softened. He reached out, his hand coming to rest on my knee. The weight of it, warm and solid, sent shivers up my spine. I want you too, he admitted quietly, more than I've wanted anyone in a very long time. But I'm afraid of what this could cost you. Shouldn't that be my decision? He nodded slowly. Yes, it should. I covered his hand with mine, threading our fingers together. Then let me make it. He looked down at our intertwined hands, then back up at me. The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. If we do this, he said, his voice low and serious, we need rules, boundaries. Like what? I asked, already knowing I'd agree to almost anything to keep this going. At work, nothing changes. You're my assistant, I'm your boss. Professional distance at all times. I nodded, though the thought of pretending nothing was happening between us all day was daunting. No one can know, he continued. Not just for my sake, but for yours. Office relationships, especially between a superior and subordinate. I understand, I assured him. No one would know. His thumb stroked the back of my hand, the simple touch sending electricity racing up my arm. And if at any point you want to stop, for any reason, you just say so. No questions asked, no professional consequences. Same goes for you, I said firmly. He smiled slightly. Deal. We sat there for a moment, hands linked, the weight of our agreement settling between us. It wasn't perfect. The secrecy, the compartmentalization would be challenging, but it was a chance, a beginning. So, I said finally, now what? Marcus's smile deepened, a hint of mischief in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Now I'd very much like to kiss you again. If that's okay. In answer, I leaned forward, bringing my free hand up to cup his jaw. His stubble was rough against my palm. Another new sensation to catalog. Our lips met softly at first, exploratory, then with growing confidence. His hand released mine to slide up my arm to my shoulder, then to the back of my neck, pulling me closer. I went willingly, shifting until our bodies pressed together from chest to knee. The kiss deepened, his tongue tracing the seam of my lips until I opened for him, letting him taste the wine on my tongue. It was different from last night's kiss, less desperate, more deliberate. He kissed like he did everything else, with focused intensity and meticulous attention to detail. His free hand came to rest on my waist, fingers slipping beneath the hem of my shirt to touch bare skin. I gasped at the contact, and he pulled back slightly, eyes questioning. Okay, he murmured. Very okay, I assured him, chasing his lips for another kiss. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, trading increasingly heated kisses on his sofa as the city lights twinkled below us. His hands explored cautiously, my shoulders, my back, the nape of my neck, never venturing too far, but leaving trails of fire wherever they touched. When we finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, he rested his forehead against mine, eyes closed. You're going to be the death of me, he murmured, the corners of his mouth turned up in a small smile. Worth it, I replied, fingers toying with the soft hair at the base of his skull. He pulled back to look at me, his expression suddenly serious again. I don't do casual very well, Daniel. The implication hung between us. This wasn't just physical attraction for him, it was more. Neither do I assured him. Relief flickered across his face, followed by something warmer, more tender. He brushed a strand of hair from my forehead, the gesture unbearably intimate. It's getting late, he said reluctantly. You should probably go. I knew he was right. We both had work tomorrow, and staying longer would only lead to territory we might not be ready to explore yet. But leaving was the last thing I wanted to do. Or I could stay, I suggested hesitantly. His expression softened. Daniel, just to sleep, I clarified quickly. I'm not ready to say goodnight yet. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I'm not either. Later, lying beside him in his absurdly large bed, both of us still partially clothed, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. His arm was draped loosely over my waist, his breath warm against the back of my neck. Outside, the city continued its nighttime symphony of distant sirens and humming traffic. Marcus? I whispered, unsure if he was still awake. Hmm? His voice was heavy with approaching sleep. What are you thinking? He was quiet for so long, I thought he might have fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible. That I haven't felt this way in a very long time. Maybe ever. My heart swelled painfully in my chest. I placed my hand over his, where it rested against my stomach, threading our fingers together. Me too, I whispered back. His arm tightened around me, pulling me closer against his chest. In that moment, all the complications, all the potential problems of our situation seemed distant and manageable. There was only this, his warmth surrounding me, the steady beat of his heart against my back, the knowledge that whatever was happening between us was rare and precious. Tomorrow we would return to the office, back to boss and assistant, maintaining the careful distance we'd agreed upon. But for now, in the quiet darkness of his bedroom, we were just Marcus and Daniel. Two people falling into something that felt dangerously close to love. I closed my eyes, letting sleep pull me under, safe in the knowledge that he would still be there when I woke. Morning arrived with gentle fingers of sunlight stretching across Marcus's bedroom. I woke slowly, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar surroundings, until memory flooded back. The dinner, the conversation, the agreement, falling asleep in his arms. The space beside me was empty, but still warm. From somewhere in the apartment came the smell of coffee and the soft murmur of a voice. Marcus on the phone, I guessed. I stretched, feeling oddly at home in his space despite having spent only one night here. The bedroom, like the rest of the apartment, was minimalist but expensive, all clean lines and muted colors. The only personal touches were the books stacked on the nightstand and a single framed black and white photograph on the wall, a cityscape of New York at dawn. I got up, running a hand through my rumpled hair and straightening my wrinkled clothes as best I could. In the ensuite bathroom, I found a new toothbrush still in its packaging, left out for me, a small consideration that made my chest warm. When I emerged from the bedroom, I found Marcus in the kitchen, dressed for work in suit pants and a crisp white shirt, though his feet were still bare. It was an oddly intimate sight. Marcus Reed, feared finance titan, padding barefoot around his kitchen. He looked up as I approached, his expression softening into something like wonder. Good morning. Morning, I replied, suddenly shy in the harsh light of day. Last night's confessions felt dreamlike now, harder to hold on to. He held out a mug of coffee. Black, no sugar. The fact that he remembered how I took my coffee shouldn't have made me feel so much, but it did. Thank you. Our fingers brushed as I took the mug, and even that small contact sent electricity racing up my arm. You're up early. Conference call with Tokyo, he explained. I didn't want to wake you. What time is it? Just after 6. I nodded, taking a sip of the perfectly brewed coffee. I should probably head home soon, change before work. Probably, he agreed, though his eyes suggested he wasn't eager for me to leave. I called a car for you. It'll be here in 30 minutes. Of course you did, I said with a small smile. Always efficient, always thinking ahead. He moved closer, hesitating just slightly before placing his hands on my waist. Did you sleep well? Better than I have in months, I admitted. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. He leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to my lips. Me too. The kiss was chaste compared to last night's, but no less meaningful. When he pulled back, his expression was more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. What is it? I asked. He shook his head slightly. I've been alone for a very long time, Daniel. By choice, mostly. It's safer that way. And now, his hands tightened slightly on my waist. Now I find myself not wanting to be alone anymore. At least, not all the time. The admission, so simple yet so profound coming from him, made my heart ache. You don't have to be. He smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his usually stern features. No, I suppose I don't. We stood there in his kitchen, coffee cooling in our mugs, the morning sunlight painting everything in soft gold. In a few hours, we'd be back in the office, maintaining professional distance, pretending last night hadn't changed everything. But for now, in this perfect bubble of morning quiet, I let myself believe that whatever was growing between us, this fragile, complicated, beautiful thing, might actually have a chance. I should finish getting ready, he said finally, reluctantly dropping his hands from my waist. And I should probably find my shoes, I replied, equally reluctant to break the moment. He nodded, taking a step back. We'll take separate cars to the office. I'll go first. You follow in 30 minutes. Right, I agreed. Back to reality, back to rules and boundaries. He hesitated, then added, Tonight, though, after work. Come back here. The simple question contained worlds of meaning, of possibility. I nodded, unable to stop the smile spreading across my face. I'd like that. He smiled back, a rare, unguarded expression that made him look younger, lighter. Good. As I watched him finish getting ready for work, transforming fully into Marcus Reed, feared finance executive, I realized with sudden clarity that I had been falling for him from the very beginning. From that first shared coffee, that first accidental touch, that first rare, genuine smile. And now, against all odds, it seemed he might be falling for me too. Whatever came next, the complications, the secrecy, the inevitable difficulties of our situation, in that moment, it all seemed worth it. For the chance to see him like this, vulnerable and open, for the possibility of whatever we might become together. As the morning light strengthened, casting long shadows across his apartment, I knew with absolute certainty that everything had changed. There was no going back now for either of us. Only forward into this beautiful, terrifying unknown we were creating together. I wasn't sure what that would look like yet, but watching him move around his kitchen, occasionally glancing at me with quiet wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe I was really there, I found I didn't mind the uncertainty. Some things, after all, were worth the risk.